And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Monday, April 1st. Now, by Bill in Orlando's popular demand, Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani, a Democrat representing Florida's 42nd District in the Orlando area, is joining us now, a great fighter on progressive issues. Representative Eskamani, nice to see you. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Dean. It's always an honor to be with you.
So, a little bit of news from the Florida Supreme Court. We were waiting. They had a 4 o'clock deadline and they waited to the very end. So, let's first touch on the negative story, then we'll talk about the good story. So, tell us, because everyone in Florida, we've talked about this. We're waiting for the Supreme Court to decide on the 15-week abortion ban. And we know if they upheld that, then the 6-week abortion ban was going to kick into effect. So, tell us a little bit of what happened and what's your reaction to their ruling?
Well, let me tell you, Dean, I had a feeling this morning that the Supreme Court was going to issue both decisions on the ballot initiatives, but also on this pending case regarding the 15-week ban. And indeed, that is what happened. So to give some context, Florida lawmakers approved a 15-week abortion ban 3 sessions ago. And then 2 sessions ago, a 6-week ban was signed into law. However, that 6-week ban had trigger language in it, meaning that it would only go into effect 30 days after a court decision on the 15-week ban, because at the time it was being litigated in the Florida Supreme Court. So that trigger came to effect today. We expected this loss on the right to privacy, which is why we launched the Florida is Protecting Freedom Yes and For campaign, because though right to privacy has been the precedent for decades under Roe, and then even in our own state constitution in the 80s, voters approved this right to privacy provision. We saw the writing on the wall. We knew the justices were not going to continue to define precedent in those terms. So that's ultimately what happened today. Out of 3 decisions that were released out of calendar, one of them included what will initially lead to a devastating 6-week abortion ban in our state, which is going to force Floridians and those who have come to Florida for care to travel as far as Virginia to make a decision about their pregnancy.
So in 30 days in Florida, it'll effectively be an abortion ban, because 6 weeks, as we know from experts who've been on, many women have no idea they're even pregnant. And then even if you find out you're pregnant at week 5, it gives you a short, teeny period of time to make a decision, first personally, yourself, your family, however you want to go through it, and then find a provider in this short window of time. Are there any exceptions? You have to prove things to Ron DeSantis personally? Like, how do you get an exception?
Yeah, he has to be in the exam room with you, right? I mean, the
That's
exceptions
next.
are the exceptions are incredibly narrow. Even when it comes to rape and incest, it's only applicable up to 15 weeks. And it's important to note that Florida is still a 24-hour delay state. So in this scenario that you just gave, if you find out you're pregnant at 5 weeks and 6 days, you likely will not be able to end that pregnancy once you get to an abortion provider, because you have to wait 24 hours before you can access care. So all of those restrictions and bans remain in place and just make a bad situation worse when it comes to bodily autonomy and accessing what essentially is health care, because this will apply to those who are choosing to end a pregnancy and those who also are facing a fetal diagnosis, which leaves them with very little options. They would have to potentially leave the state of Florida if their life is not at risk, for example. And of course, we've seen situations across the country where women are allowed to become more sick before they can access the care that they need.
Yeah, we had on the president of Planned Parenthood on Friday, and we talked about that it's not at all hyperbolic to say these abortion bans are killing women. And
Absolutely.
that,
Yep.
especially the ones at conception, but even this one's almost effectively at conception, and that women are going to die because we already had a horrific high maternal mortality rate, much higher than any first world country, and especially for people of color. So now you force more women against their will to carry a fetus to term. So you're going to have Florida women dying because of the Republican Supreme Court and the Republican legislature and governor.
Well, absolutely. And just to add to that point, we're also continuously punishing poor people for being poor, because the reality is that people of means, it will be obviously a restriction and burdensome, but they will find a way to end their pregnancy by traveling to another state, finding hotel stays. I mean, they'll be able to navigate what is a difficult and unnecessary situation when it comes to these burdens, but they'll be able to overcome them. It's going to be working class families, communities of color, folks who live in poverty, who are not going to have the same rights and freedoms and decisions as everyone else. And we essentially are setting a tone that says, if you don't have money, then you don't have options. And I just so fundamentally disagree with that. I think regardless of where you come from or what your zip code is, you should be able to decide when or when not to parent.
And when you heard the Republicans in their debate on the 6-week abortion ban, the other abortion ban, uh, do you get a sense their real goal is a total abortion ban at day one?
Absolutely. In fact, an all-out abortion ban was filed this previous legislative session, and also an attempt to define fetal personhood was also filed. And if it wasn't for the IVF decision out of Alabama, that would have became law this year. That IVF decision spooked a lot of conservatives who finally realized just how extreme their positions are and really couldn't rectify, their position on supporting pregnancy while also banning IVF, essentially. And so that decision out of Alabama led to us in Florida stopping that legislation. But I mean, they have every intention to take away the abortion pill. They have every intention to make it impossible for minors to seek judicial bypass. They are committed to taking away all of our fundamental freedoms. And the irony about this too, Dean, is that Florida Republicans had a press conference today, and my God, I mean, they were projecting so much. They were calling the ballot initiative extreme. They were saying that it, extends abortion to pregnancy. I mean, it just complete lies. And of course, it's just based upon this just out of touch, outdated, archaic, and controlling vision for America that does not reflect the majority of people that call this country and stay home.
I'm chatting with Democratic State Representative from Florida, Anna Eskamani. It's also interesting when you look at the states that have the most extreme abortion bans, and while there's some exceptions, but in general, they're the states where Jim Crow was. And
Right.
there's a similar mindset at play here, and taking fundamental freedom away from women because of religion, which was used to defend Jim Crow, and religion was also used to defend slavery. But taking away a freedom because of your belief system is consistent with the legacy of Jim Crow on some level, and the Confederacy, to be blunt.
It's all about control. It's all about control. And it is consistently white male Republicans are the ones pushing these abortion bans onto others. And so it really, unfortunately, does have these roots in stripping away bodily autonomy and not allowing for there to be freedom of expression or freedom of choice. I mean, some of these issues are very intersectional. So there are common themes here, and we have to be united in fighting back against that. We have to fight back against abortion bans, fight back against voter suppression, support access to care for trans youth and LGBTQ plus people. And really all these fights are about individual freedoms and liberties, and we have to stand together in solidarity.
The Republicans are about freedom, the freedom to oppress others. I mean, that's really what this party is about now. It's unbelievable. I've never seen this Orwellian use of the word freedom like they do now. So let's talk about the good news. So the Supreme Court, they sat on it for a while, but tell us about the uplifting news that's triggering the right, because they know something's coming in November.
Well, two of the other decisions that came out today were both pertaining to separate ballot initiatives that Republican Attorney General Ashley Moody was trying to stop from going forward before the voters. And that is codification of abortion alongside recreational cannabis. And so despite efforts by Governor Ron DeSantis and stacking the courts, by Republican Attorney General Ashley Moody and trying to provide arguments to say that this tax on both initiatives were vague and unclear to voters, it passed. For cannabis, it was a 5-2. For abortion, it was a 4-3. But both made it through this process that the Attorney General was trying to create to stop the voters, the will of the voters. And so this November in Florida, you will have the opportunity to codify reproductive rights in our state constitution and to open up the pathway for recreational cannabis.
And I saw that Ron DeSantis was against both of them. Now, speaking on the abortion one, I was looking at a summary of the ballot initiative, and it's like no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability. So it's the same similar language in Ohio when they had a ballot initiative. And that's generally meant about 24 weeks. So is that the understanding in Florida too, despite what the GOP is saying?
Correct. Typically, viability is going to be defined between 22, 24 weeks, and it is unique per pregnancy. However, I also want to stress, despite what Republicans are saying, Florida was a viability restrictive state prior to the 15-week ban. That was our standard. So
Mhm.
there weren't any types of abortion services provided to what the description of those on the far right are trying to spread. I really encourage folks to call out the misinformation, remind everyday people that abortion is healthcare and that a viability restriction is just that. It is a viability restriction. And again, that's what Florida was before. So it's not like something too unfamiliar for us in the Sunshine State. And it's really important for us to ensure that doctors make those decisions, not politicians.
I can only imagine the fear mongering you're going to see on the right over this. Like, did this ballot initiative let you kill babies up to 10 years of age or something like ridiculous like that? You could kill a teenager. This is unbelievable what they want to do. That's what they're going to say, even though it's very clear what viability means. They tried the same thing in Ohio. But in your state, you need 60% approval of the voters to enact this, right? To make it a part of the Constitution?
Correct, which is why we need to ensure that there is multi-partisan support for this. And I'm proud to say that the ballot initiative itself collected more than 150,000 verified signatures from registered Republicans, adding to the
Wow.
total of 1 million to get on the ballot. And so we already have bipartisan support in those who signed the ballot initiative. And we feel very confident that when it comes to the voters in November, that you will see Republicans, Democrats, and NPAs of every generation, every background support this effort.
The Biden Harris team already sent out an email, said it's going to be on the ballot in Florida, that abortion's in play and that your state's in play now and all of that. And before this initiative, I wasn't sure, but the fact that they've done this two things, if the Supreme Court had struck down the 6-week or 15-week abortion ban, it would have been different. But by saying we're banning abortion and you have a chance to change it right now in the same year, it's so immediate. So how do you think it could play out in terms of increasing the turnout?
Well, my first focus is on patient care, right, Dean? So I'm thinking about what are we going to do to help patients access abortion when we have a 6-week ban into place. So that means supporting abortion funds. It means helping when it comes to travel and just navigating all the challenges that people are going to face in trying to access reproductive care. Those stories, those
Mm-hmm.
experiences are going to galvanize backlash to the 6-week ban. And I think that will help tell the story to Floridians and Americans of what it means to ban abortion 6 weeks. What are the consequences for health and safety? What are the realities for families who find themselves in these really difficult and tragic circumstances? What does it mean for
Right.
a survivor of rape who can't access reproductive rights? So I do think the reality will set in for everyday people, and that will help ensure that there is bipartisan support for this initiative come November.
Well, we're going to see. We're going to follow this closely. I really think it does bring Florida perhaps in play. It's hard to say how much resources the Democratic team has on the national level. But as of now, they're outraising Trump a great deal. So it could work out. I'm curious about something. Somebody called last week and asked about it. And since you're in the Orlando area where Disney is, so Disney settled their lawsuit with Ron DeSantis.
Right.
And what can you share about what the settlement is and the why behind it?
Well, it definitely seems like almost a reset button for both Walt Disney World and Ron DeSantis. I mean, clearly Ron didn't win the presidential bid, and part of his rise to power was this notion of taking down Disney. And so a settlement really is a surrender. It's basically saying that we don't want to fight anymore. We're going to agree to different terms. And it does seem like Disney benefits from having less extreme individuals part of their leadership team at Reedy Creek. And of course, DeSantis gets to avoid a clean loss in court.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, it's yet to be seen if Disney plans to restart their political giving. Candidly, I hope they don't. I think that corporation involvement in campaign finance is hurting and ruining our democracy. I think that we need to see less corporate involvement in campaign finance. I don't take money from these entities for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious if that will re-begin, if we'll start seeing Disney go back to usual. Because remember, Dean, before DeSantis attacked Disney, they were giving to Florida Republicans 3-1 in political campaigning. They basically
Wow.
funded Oh yeah, they funded the monster that was created. So I'm very hopeful that won't happen again.
So I know you don't take money from them, but if they would offer you like a day pass at Disney, would you be like, all right,
You know what's so funny,
Pirates
Dean,
of the
is
Caribbean? I'm like,
let
maybe
me tell you, let me tell
Epcot.
you, I was invited to see the Star Wars, entire layout, and I declined. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So I'm just a firm believer in kind of rising above those types of perks and do what I can for the people. I think everyday folks should have that type of access, not me.
Good point. That was a test and you passed, Representative Eskamani. That's it. She is not for sale. You hear that, Disney? So a couple other things here. One, and I saw you posting about this. So President Biden designated March 31st, which is last
Oh my
Sunday,
gosh.
a trans day of visibility. And the right's going crazy. It happens to be Easter, not for all Christians, because for Orthodox Christians, it's May 5th. But for the Christians who celebrate, so they're like, you see what Biden did? He did this to somehow demean Christianity, because in their view, Jesus is vindictive and wouldn't be embracing of people who are in need and who are vulnerable and who need love. See, to the right, their view of Christianity and Jesus is vastly different than the Jesus I've read about in the Bible. But what's your reaction to this?
I mean, what a joke. Like, what a joke. First of all, they refer to Democrats as snowflakes. I have never seen more snowflake behavior than the meltdowns happening on Twitter over the weekend. I actually really stayed off Twitter on Saturday, and then I opened the app back on Sunday, and I just see complete chaos of adult grown men saying just absurd things about our president and about trans people. And it's so sad. It's so sad that because they can't solve problems, all they can do is create chaos and controversy. And as I've said before, there is no scarcity of human dignity. And every day marks multiple holidays and traditions. And so to respect and honor that is just a small thing we can do to share in one another's humanity. And just to see the meltdown from conservatives, I mean, it's just it is laughable. It is very laughable.
And if it was the week before, the President Biden designated the Sunday before, it's Palm Sunday. And the week before that, it's Lent. And it's the Feast of the Assumption. It's something you've never heard of. Some lesson. How did you not know in the Bible on page 96, it says a certain holiday on this day? So let them whine. And it's all inconsistent with Jesus's teachings, who
Oh,
was about,
absolutely.
you were a stranger and I welcome you in. And he cared for those who others were turning away and demonizing lepers and prostitutes. And I'm not analogizing the trans community with that, but I'm just saying the idea of Jesus was helping those who were the most vulnerable, not demonizing the most vulnerable. That's what Jesus was about, love, and they're not. So, last two things here. One, I saw you posting about this, that the census, for the first time, the U.S. government's changing the boxes you check. And now you can there'll be a box for Middle Eastern or Hispanic or North African heritage. So are you happy about this? And are you going to check a certain box? Is there going to be breaking it down by, or is this to say Middle Eastern more broadly, or it's going to have, I wonder, I haven't seen, I just think it's Middle Eastern broadly, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, to be clear, it's definitely not perfect. I know there's been some disappointment and concern about, what the new options will be. But I will tell you, Dean, personally, for me as an Iranian American, my parents would sometimes check off the white box because they didn't
Yeah.
see what other box reflected our family. And so I'm actually very, very excited. I think it's a big deal. The first time in 27 years we've updated demographics to reflect the diversity of our country, and just seeing the rise of Arab Americans in society, the rise of Persians, the rise of so many other cultural diasporas, it gives me a lot of pride that I can actually self-identify accurately moving forward.
Well, if you're of Middle Eastern heritage, you're generally not treated like a white person in America. So it should really be societal, like how are you treated. Although Maz Jobrani would tell me that Iranians are really Aryan and they're white, although doesn't believe he's
Oh
white,
my God.
but he's like
Don't get me started.
historically.
Don't get me started. There are so many
So
Iranians who do think they are white. And I'm like, guys.
he doesn't, right? He doesn't think, but he would explain to me that, and people don't know Maz, he's really funny Persian
Oh, it's
Iranian American
amazing.
comedian, probably the most famous Iranian American comedian out there. So we used to tour together all the time. And we would
Yep.
talk about this stuff. And I looked whiter. I want a box that says half Arab, half Italian. Like I really want it narrowed down
Yes.
even more, like than a quarter, whatever you might be. Like you can do the things to let the census people go
You can
crazy. Like
like
this
just
person's an
upload
eight.
your like DNA tests, right? Just like upload
I,
that.
I took the test. I'm exactly what I've been told. I'm
That's
exactly
amazing.
half Arab, half Italian. It was kind of remarkable. Like they probably Googled me and just sent the results back. Like he talks about being half Arab, half Italian. That's what he is. So look, Florida, I know Democratic Party just had a shakeup. A few Democratic county chairs were fired, whatever it was. I'm not going to comment it because I don't know the details other than I read about it. But is the Democratic Party going to be unified? Are they ready? Is a Democratic chair now that you have? It's Nikki Fried, right? And
Correct.
how are you guys
Yeah.
looking for November? I know it's tough. It's a big state, and Republicans had more money for apparently a long time and an infrastructure that was really robust. How are you looking for November?
Well, I'm hopeful that everyday Democrats can approach November in a united way. I will say, Dean, that my focus is very much on my community in Central Florida,
Sure.
and we're leading on vote by mail. We're leading on voter registration efforts. I have a team from Pew Power from Florida on 8 different college campuses every week doing this type of work.
Wow.
And so I would say the collaboration has definitely gotten better. I'm in constant communication with the FDP, the Florida Democratic Party, as are my colleagues. I think the communication is stronger. I do worry about those suspensions. Personally, I don't think they were a good idea. I just think it creates unnecessary conflict and chaos when we're in election year. We have to be united. However, I feel very confident that we will be focused on beyond our own egos and what November actually means for the Sunshine State, because this is going to be a critical election year for many reasons. But with both these initiatives before us, we have to focus on having that broad-based appeal. I always tell folks that I think Florida is a rainbow state, meaning you have to build a multi-generational, multi-class, a multi-racial, multi-gender coalition to win. It can't just be, a myopic viewpoint. You have to really try to appeal to every type of person.
And that's great. And their state is diverse. So when you look now at 2024, because of the Supreme Court decision today, has it made, we knew reproductive freedom and abortion access was going to be big. Has it made it the defining issue? And do you think the marijuana, the constituency that's going to come out to support it, to legalize it, that they complement each other? That's going to help Democrats?
Well, I always want to be cautious because folks might remember that in 2020, Florida voters approved the $15 minimum wage amendment. And the
Right.
state also elected former President Trump into office during that year.
Mm,
And
right.
so I always want to be cautious about making assumptions about the electorate. Now, with that said, I do think that abortion access in particular, if we look at trends across the country, that we have seen this issue be very important for voters of all political backgrounds. And I've had many Republican women come to me and say, my party has gone too far. I'm a Reagan Republican. I'm not a MAGA Republican. And so I do think there are opportunities here to reach across the aisle and to really build this diverse coalition to reject extremism. And that's going to be my goal at the end of the day. We need to reject extremism coming from the right. And I think that that's a message that wins voters over from multiple different political experiences and backgrounds.
And are there also like local issues that you think will motivate people? I remember the special election, we talked about it. I think maybe insurance was a big issue, but
Property
is
insurance.
housing an issue? Is insurance
Yeah,
insurance is a big.
absolutely. And let me tell you, Dean, we just, got out of legislative session not even 3 weeks ago, and so many missed opportunities, despite and even bipartisan bills that were filed to address the property insurance crisis. They were never given hearings. And so this legislature, we did nothing to address property insurance costs. So I do think that'll be another palpable issue this year. Basic cost of living, the cost of rent, the lack of consumer protections. Floridians cannot afford Florida. So I think all of that's also going to motivate people's decisions this November.
Floridians can't afford Florida. That's so the cost of living has moved that much.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. I mean,
it
you have to remember that we have a service-driven economy here.
right.
So if you
Mhm.
ever look up Florida's median income, I mean, it's dramatically low compared to the cost of living, and that's partly due to the structure of our economy. Meanwhile, we see new people moving into Florida who have remote jobs from other states that pay you better. So whether it's New York,
Hmm.
California, folks are coming to Florida, maintaining their salaries so they can afford higher rent and housing costs, but everyone else can't. Their wages have been stagnant. And so that disparity, the lack of housing supply, all of that has created a scenario where we are today, where everyday people are struggling.
Well, I think the number one employer on the right is the DeSantis administration, right? So if you're a conservative, he'll put you on a school board or wherever. So Representative Eskamani, people want to follow you. I know you're actually active on social media. I think it's probably you. You might have your staff doing it, but where can people go? Where can they follow you?
Well, it's definitely me. And so you can follow me online at Anna for Florida. And so that is fully spelled out with 2 N's at Anna for Florida. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I refuse to say X, Twitter, YouTube. Then our website is annaforflorida.com.
I think it's so funny how people say, I refuse to say X. And I started getting used to saying X. People stop saying X. I'm like, okay, we're going to do Twitter. Representative Eskamani, thanks so much for being on, especially today with the big breaking news from Florida and what's going on. I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Thanks for having me.